Hey, podcast listening people. Connor Doobie here. Welcome into B2B Mentors. We have a guest interview for you today. Feel free to join in, or if you want to listen or tune in after the fact, of course, you can find the podcast on all your favorite podcast apps, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, Spotify, iTunes, you name it. I think I said iTunes twice. Also, please do me a tiny favor. If you find value in this, make sure you share it with your friends, your colleagues. We're bringing this information for you and to you absolutely free, no cost whatsoever. And so do me that small favor, make sure to spread the word. And I am bringing you a great guest today. So I'm going to pull the man up himself, Kerry Cunningham, who has authored and co-authored a wide range of key models and frameworks for SiriusDecisions. Forrester, has spoken at dozens of industry events, including 4 appearances as a SiriusDecisions Summit keynote speaker. Throughout, Kerry has continued to drive the buying group's revolution in B2B, helping organizations transform from outmoded, ineffective, lead-based practices to modern buying, team, and opportunity-centric processes to unlock next-level performance. And that is like the most elegant bio I think I've read ever. Kerry, it's good to have you, my friend. Good to see you, man.
Good to be here. Good to talk to you, Connor.
Yeah. What better to do than on a Friday?
Exactly.
Get to talk, nerd out on a Friday. You get to go watch some sports here after this, and it's all good. Life's good.
Yeah, it's great. Good to be here.
So tell me, what did I miss in your bio? Give us a little, I'm going to give you permission to brag a little bit, which I know is difficult to do, but share a bit of, what led young Kerry to Kerry in your life and career where you're at today.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah. There are probably a couple of interesting things about it because it hasn't been a typical business career in some senses. It started off as a pure accident. I started as a B2B SDR when I was trying to be a writer, and I did that part-time for a few years. I was successful in publishing a couple of things, but finally realized not going to make any money. I can't live this way. And started working more full-time in that teleservices company. We had about 12 reps or something when I started. And 17 years later, I was the VP of operations over a company with 400 or 500 SDRs in it. So it was a great, interesting ride, total accident the entire way. But there were a lot of stuff that I really loved about it. I spent a lot of time working with B2B tech companies in the Bay Area and San Francisco. So did an absolute ton of learning about tech, how to talk about tech, how to prospect for tech. Learned a lot about how the business in the Valley and all that operates. We sold that company, made a little bit of money. I took the next 4 or 5 years off, out of business, and did what any normal person would do. I went and worked in social science research labs, got a master's degree in organizational psychology.
Any layman's person would definitely dive into that venture.
But I'd had some intellectual itches that I'd been wanting to scratch for a long time, and so I took a few years and did that greatest few years of my life, and it's really informed everything that I've done since then. So made my way back into business after that, and ended up a couple of years later at SiriusDecisions. They needed somebody who would talk to their clients about SDRs, and nobody else wanted to do it. I had a lot of experience, so they hired me. And then I started working with one of my buddies there, Terry Flaherty, and it's really what brought me to the point and the topic we're going to talk about today, which is that we were working with SiriusDecisions clients to try to help build their lead management, demand management processes and practices and improve them. Terry developed this thing called waterfall diagnostics that helps do that. But what we figured out after a couple of years of banging our head against that wall was that you could only go from really shitty performance to just kind of sucky. And like there was a ceiling right at about.
And what do you mean by performance? What was the task you were actually trying to solve at the time?
Yeah, trying to improve the rate that leads get converted into business. And so everybody in B2B has the leads coming into Marketo or HubSpot or something. lots of them do lead scoring. We have MQLs. MQLs get sent to SDRs to get qualified, and then on to sales reps. That's the typical process. But the conversion rates across the board from lead to closed business, well under 1% for most B2B organizations. Now, some, if you have a low ticket, a high volume item, could be better than that. But for the most part, they were way down there. Big part of the reason that salespeople don't respect marketing, because what they're getting just doesn't work. And usually you just we ended up seeing this carousel. We could get them from 0.5% to 0.75% by improving processes and implementing service level agreements and that kind of stuff. But it was still really awful. All right. And the product being delivered to sales still didn't work most of the time. And that led us to some innovations that we'll talk about today. But led us to understanding that was just the wrong approach altogether, and that we needed a radical change to improve performance.
So back in the early Silicon Tech days, what was that environment like, and how is it different today?
Yeah, I mean, if you think back, even because I go back to the 90s in this, and it's interesting because there was a lot of money thrown at the original .com boom, and there was no accountability for what was going to happen. So
you just have a good domain name and get
right.
tens of millions of dollars in investment. It's like
there was an awful lot of solution in search of problem, an awful lot of look what we can do now that didn't have a real value prop. And the interesting thing is being on the front lines, trying to go find qualified opportunities in that space. You get really clear about, after a little while, which things had some potential buyers and which ones didn't. And it really informed how we did business. So I mean, it was fun. You learned a lot, met a ton of people, made some really bad investments, lost a bunch of money.
you made some bad investments.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because you thought you knew something. Right.
Yeah.
It seemed like you knew something. Oh yeah, I've seen lots of tech companies. That one, that's going to be good. Yeah, no, didn't. You get caught up in the idea that it's so cool, it's going to work, right? Well, so cool is so cool, but it doesn't mean that it's going to make anybody else more successful. And if it doesn't, it's not going to work.
I feel like there's still a lot of that in the investment Silicon world. I network with a lot of VC groups and have been part of the Denver startup community for a while. And I still my mind is blown by the amount of money that gets put into some of these startups that think they're going to take Facebook over, which, who knows, maybe they have a chance now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the investor community, they know that they're gambling, right? They know that they're going to invest in a bunch of different possibilities, and only a couple of them are going to work out. But you're really hoping that one's going to work out enough to overcome the ones that fail. But there's a lot more visibility and accountability. I think you have to have some sort of value prop for the most part today. I suppose it's possible that you can get some money without it, but back in those days, I mean, it seemed like literally, hey, look, we just did something. We got some money, and now can you go find us leads? And what we had to be clear about then was, after a little while, no, we can't do that. But what we can do is we can call a whole bunch of people who you think are your targets, and then see if there's any market for it. Right. So we kind of transformed from having a pure let's produce opportunities to also having a service that was, let's see if anybody cares about this. And we'll be able to tell you that after a little while, but I can't guarantee you we're going to get you any opportunities, because there may not be any.
Do you still invest in advised startups now?
Certainly advise startups, and that's a lot of what we did at SiriusDecisions and Forrester.
Right.
Those guys. I don't invest in early stage companies really at all. I'm at a point in my life where I can't really afford that. I don't have. Here's the thing: taking 4 or 5 years off in the middle of your career means that you probably are at the end of that period of time. And I was living in San Francisco the whole time. Didn't really adjust my lifestyle at all. So, I'm a little more conservative with what I invest in now.
Would you go back and do that again? Stop and,
Yeah.
if you were to continue in industry versus going back into school, it's interesting. And what did you go back to school for? Let everybody know.
Social psychology, organizational psychology, and specifically, a few different things. Really fascinated by what drives people's behavior in organizations, and that came from running that teleservices company for a long time. So it's a hugely people-oriented business. You're the machine that produces the output. It's people, and so became really fascinated in how to run an organization to optimize people's performance and just what makes people tick. I was a psychology major as an undergrad, and so it made sense to go back and study that again. I was just fascinated by it. Also fascinated by this field within psychology called evolutionary psychology that looks primarily at, we're human beings 100,000 years ago. Somebody who was built with the same brain and body and all of that as me was wandering around in the wilderness, half naked and hunting and fishing and sleeping in caves.
I still do that from time to time. By the way, I'm just going to throw that out there.
So while I go watch tennis this afternoon,
I'm going to be half naked running around in the forest somewhere. Yeah. Until I step on something pokey, then it's game over. Like I'm back home. Like,
but
oh
think
man,
about
that really hurt.
People who are physically exactly like us, for millennia, were wandering around in the woods with no shoes. Right? I mean, it's hard to even think about. But when you think about what a person, an individual, a brain, a family that was really developed for that environment is doing in a place like where we are today, it's pretty interesting, and it informs how we get along or don't get along and all of that stuff. So I studied a lot of that, a lot of consumer behavior psychology, which is really fascinating stuff too. And one of the things that it really helped me do is understand how to research and dive into a problem, how to figure out how to start solving a problem. And it really did come in handy when we started looking at what was broken about B2B and the way demand was generated.
So what have, and I'm sure especially your experience with Cirrus and Forrester have more insights than probably most career marketers. What are some of the biggest mistakes? What are some of the biggest oversights for the modern B2B marketer?
Well, we can go to the title of the podcast today. Why you're falling lead conversion rates are a good thing. When we started looking at this back at SiriusDecisions and realized, you can't really improve this to a point where it's acceptable, right? It's not even acceptably bad. It's unacceptably bad. And the problem is you have a whole B2B industry that's built around this idea of getting leads coming into the website and then somehow converting them into business, and using marketing automation, using lead scoring, MQLs, and all of that. And as it turns out, that's just fundamentally not how it works. So, that's the biggest problem. And what I mean by that is, and it's in my bio quite a bit, is that the buyer in B2B for most B2B purchases is not an individual person. So that person who fills out the form on your website, they're on a team. And that team is on average between 5 and 10 people. Right? And everybody knows that. If you sell stuff in B2B, you know that, right? You know that there's a champion, financial buyer. There's this. There's
we know it and we loathe it. It's like, come on,
right.
Can't I go to one person?
Right. Makes it complicated. And that complication is the thing that it's a pain in the butt to deal with. But if you don't, how effective can you be? Like Terry and I, my buddy back at SiriusDecisions, we love this analogy about medicine because it kind of says it all. Like up until 1850, your life expectancy at birth, if you were in Europe, was 35 years or 37 years or something like that. And the vast majority of people, 60% or so of people, died of some sort of infection or infectious disease. All right. So your life was short, you got sick, and you died. And and most of you didn't, not most of you, a lot of you didn't make it out of infancy. All right. That up until 1850. And it's not that people weren't studying how to make people healthy. There were massive books written, lots and lots of, you can fill a library with books written about how to evaluate somebody's bile and prescribe some herbal medicine for them. If you had a headache that was really bad, they had a cure for that. They drilled a hole in your head. I mean, it seemed to make sense because it feels like pressure, right? When you get the headache and you sinus headache or something, it feels like there's pressure. You want to let something out of your head. So they did, and it was a common treatment. Bloodletting was another one, right? So it feels like I don't feel good, I've got a headache or whatever. Sure, maybe you've got too much blood. Let's let some out.
Let's throw some leeches on that face.
Leeches.
Yeah.
The thing is, so there were books and all of this. This was up until 1850, that's what happened. And most of the time, a trip to the physician would make you worse, not better. But people thought they were improving. People studied it. People took it seriously. It wasn't like people said, "Oh, we don't know what we're doing, but let's try this." They actually thought they knew what they were doing, right? The problem was it was all bullshit. And we know it was all bullshit because as soon as they discovered germs and discovered using sanitation and antiseptics and antibacterials and those kinds of things, life expectancy rose by 20 years in about 10 years, right? So it goes from 30 or 35 or 40 up to 55 or 60.
Was that really a 10-year period?
Yeah, instantaneously
Wow.
in the places where it happened. Now, across the world, not surprisingly, that discovery rolled out much more slowly. So it took another 60, 70 years for Africa to have the same kinds of sanitation and the access to the medicines and all of that. So, when we think about that, one of the interesting things is if you were a physician in 1840, your job was actually really, really simple and you didn't have to go to medical school. Right? There were herbal medicines you learned from, you were tutored by somebody you studied with a physician in your neighborhood or village or whatever, and then you became the physician. But once they discovered the germ theory of disease, things got super complicated, right? Because there's lots of different germs, lots of different ways to treat them, and all kinds of antibiotics and things were developed. And now you got to go to medical school. And so if you're a physician, life got very, very much more complicated at the end of the 19th century, right? And much more complex, and it became professional, and you had to go to school for so many more years and all of that, right? So you could, if you wanted to, look at that if you're a physician and go, well, why is it so complicated? Why do we have to deal with all the complications? Why? Because you're killing people, or at least not saving them if you don't, right? The complications, the germs and everything, they were always there. The Curies and the other folks who were involved, Listerine guy, they didn't invent the germs. The germs were there. They discovered that they were there, and that, your health is a lot more complicated than you thought. Now we have genetic medicine. So now physicians are starting to have to understand the impact of your genes and the combinations of your genes on your health and all of that. More and more complicated. Medical professionals have to get more and more specialized. But that's just the way it is, right? And if you want to be effective as a physician or medical practice, you've got to deal with all of the complexity that you can. And it's no different in B2B. A B2B buyer, somebody buying an IBM mainframe in 1975, it wasn't an individual person. It was probably a bigger committee than it is today, because that was like a crazy expensive purchase, right? So it's kind of, people like talking about how the buyers changed and all that stuff. I think the buyer's the same. Buyers, a bunch of people that have to find a solution for their business. What they have access to is different. They got a lot more information available to them now. They can buy what they want, or they can research what they want without talking to you for the most part. But the more of that complexity that we can deal with and account for, the more effective we're going to be. And that's what we've been trying to get people to realize and do.
I agree with you. I don't think the buyers have changed. And I think even something as simple as, content marketing is something new, right? Well, technically, if you're drawing cave paintings on a wall, like that's content marketing because you're advertising and you need content for it. So, but my original question for you was, what are some of the biggest mistakes that B2B marketers are making now? And what are some of the nuances of what they should be doing? And how does the lead conversion rate apply to that? Like where are they missing the mark on this?
So one
And
is,
we talked about this too. Actually, let me rephrase it this way. Give us that oh shit moment for marketers.
yeah.
I literally wrote that down too, by the way.
And I'm glad you did, because it's really important. So the first thing is, if you've got a B2B website, there are people coming to that website. 9 out of 10 or 95 out of 100, somewhere in there, are there anonymously. They don't tell you who they are. They don't fill out your forms. But if you're, and not picking on them, but if you're a MuleSoft or some other very B2B company, people are not going to your website because you've got great graphics or because you have a kick-ass video about how your solution works, right? People are going there because you have a problem that this company solves. Or you may be a competitor, you may be an analyst, a Forrester analyst or something like that. But the only people going to your website are people who have a professional interest. And if 95 out of 100 of them are anonymous, and you don't know what companies they're coming from, that is a very serious oh shit moment. And you think about, if you're the VP of demand or the CMO from a B2B company, just rough figures, 90% of the budget that you spend to get people to come to your website shows up as anonymous traffic. It's like almost all of the money that you spend results in anonymous traffic. Today, what most CMOs or VPs of demand do is they go, yeah, that sucks. Let's see if I can get 2% more of them to fill out a form. No. I mean, yes, do that. Try to get more of them to fill out a form, but you're not going to make a dent in that 90% by getting more of them to fill out a form. Right.
Because some of them may be in the early stages even of just the research process. And so they're not going to, no matter how much you optimize, they may not fill out of anything right now.
That's right. And you think about the people who are least likely to fill out a form, it's probably the people who are most likely to be decision makers, right? The people who are going to fill out a form are the people that the decision makers send to the website to fill out the form, to get the content, so that the decision maker doesn't get the call from the SDR, right? So that's a big part of what's happening. So one oh shit is, okay, almost all the money that you spend results in anonymous traffic and you have no idea what's in it. A lot of marketers still think that you can't know what's in it, or it's not worthwhile or something like that. That is the first big mistake that marketers are making. You can know somewhere between 20 and 50 or 60% of where that anonymous traffic is coming from, what companies it's coming from. Today, 2 to 5% of where your traffic is coming from. You got to do that, right? You just absolutely have to do that. That's thing number one. Don't stop listening to the podcast, but while you're listening to the rest of it, start, put that in motion. Go figure that out.
And most companies are using like a Google Analytics or something like that, and think that that's going to give them the data, enough of the data that they need to make smart decisions.
Right. And it doesn't by itself. It just really doesn't. What you need to know is how many unique individuals are you getting from different companies that are coming to your website, and then what are they looking at? Right. So if you offer one solution, you don't need to know what they're looking at. But if you have multiple solutions and you've got 20 different people from a prospect account on your website, they could be looking at 20 different things. Right. So, and that you probably wouldn't care about. But if they're looking at one thing, this is an example that we use all the time. It's like, if if I were to tell you you're a B2B seller, if I were to tell you that one of your prospect accounts has one person on your website now and they're chewing up all of your white papers, but here's another account where they've had 10 anonymous visitors and one guy who filled out a form and looked at one white paper, which of those two things as a sales rep do you want to take action on right away, right? And it's really obviously the one that's got a whole bunch of people on your website, right? Because the one guy chewing up your content, who knows why that person's doing that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if there's 10 people from a company on your website, anonymously or not, there's something happening there that you have to know about. Right.
From a
So
given from one given company, you're
one
seeing
company.
multiple hits from one company.
Right.
Yep.
So if you can't see that, if you don't know that that's happening, you're missing almost all of what you paid to produce.
Mm-hmm.
You paid to get those people to your website. That's what you got to know about it. So that's the first really biggest, most important thing, and it's almost the easiest to fix. My company does that. Other companies do that. You can go fix that today. You have to do it. The second involves what happens when somebody does fill out a form. So let's say that company is in market for your solution and a person fills out the form. Today, if that person consumes some content, they become an MQL and they go off to the SDR. But in most B2B organizations today, if a second person from that company comes to your website 2 days later, and they fill out a form and they look at all your content, they become an MQL, right? Your Marketo or Eloqua or whatever says, yep, that's an MQL now. That goes to the SDR. So the SDR just got a lead from this company a couple of days ago, and now they get one today. So what does the BDR do with the one they get today? 7 out of 10 times, I would say, they mark it as a duplicate lead and they get rid of it. Now, yeah, I mean, given what we've already talked about, you can see why that's tragic and stupid, right? That second person should be a signal that verifies the first one. Like that first one, we don't know. People come and fill out and look at content all the time. A second person doing that from the same account, that should make you a little more interested. Like you should now be sitting up in your chair going, oh, there might be something happening here. But SDRs typically have incentives that say, I can't produce a second opportunity in the same account for the same thing. So I mark that as a duplicate lead. Now, if you're and here's the oh shit for the VP of demand or the CMO is, I actually was just really successful at attracting multiple members of a buying team to my website to fill out a form. And that turned into, instead of having 100% conversion rate, here's an account that's really interested, and now I send them off to the SDR, I got a 50% lead conversion rate from that, right? And that's part of the why your falling lead conversion rates are a good thing, because if I get more people from that company in my processes today, because if I get a third or fourth, then my conversion rate goes down to 25%, to 12.5%, it just keeps going down as I get more people coming from that company. Now, I'm still more likely to get an opportunity out of that account, right? They're going to have to really want it to become an opportunity for us, but I'm still more likely to do it. So that's to me, those are two things that if you're a CMO or a VP of demand, you're spending a ton of money to get people to come to your website and to fill out forms, and you're squandering almost all of it right off the top.
And one of your premises is like you're doing a lot to get a lot of traffic, but what about like quality traffic? It's better to have less people reaching out to you that are buying committees than more people reaching out to you who are just random ass prospects from all over, the internet.
Yeah, well, when you add that, most organizations today are moving towards some sort of ABM, some sort of account-based marketing, which really just means we're not going to spray and pray as much. We're going to target a set of accounts. We're going to agree with sales what accounts those are. That's all really good, really smart. But then think to yourself, if that works, what's that going to look like in those two things that we just talked about? What's it going to look like on my website? What's that going to look like in my marketing automation data? And so if I'm successful in marketing to a smaller number of accounts, I'm going to get more anonymous traffic from those accounts, and I'm going to get more leads from each of those accounts. But if I don't have the ability to look at the anonymous traffic and see where it's coming from, and if I can't see where I have multiple leads from the same organization, once again, I'm going to squander the whole thing. And that is exactly what has happened in the early stages of ABM.
So what does that mean for SDRs nowadays too? Because back maybe even 10 or so years ago, it kind of made sense. Like someone downloads a white paper on your website or case study or something, and then they get a call from a salesperson, an SDR, right?
Yeah.
Is that best practice nowadays? Like, is there enough there to be doing sales outreach versus further nurturing when they're marketing qualified? Because I still know a lot of companies, a lot of CMOs I've even talked to on this podcast who have their sales team, aggressively going after people once they've downloaded something or opted in on anything. And I have my opinions on that, but what are your thoughts on that?
No, I think it's terrible, and terrible with a qualification. And the qualification is just this: an MQL by itself is, again, it's that 99% failure rate, at least, right? MQL by itself is meaningless. What you need to know is whether that MQL represents a buying team that is in market for something that you could sell them. And just looking at that MQL, you can't say that, right? And so that's why people don't want to fill out forms, because they know they're going to get a call. And if they're not in market, they absolutely don't want to get a call. And most of them are not in market. Most of them are just interested, curious, whatever it might be. So that what you really need to do is you need to look at the whole suite of signals that's available to you. Is there third-party intent? Is there evidence that that company is out looking around at my competitors, et cetera?
Right.
That's a great signal.
And
right?
just to pause you on that point real quick, chances are they are looking at your competitors. And if you're coming off as desperate and chasing them down versus allowing them to be chasing you down in a way, you've lost the power dynamic in the relationship.
Yeah, that's right. And again, most of them are not in market, right? So just because they filled out a form doesn't mean they're in market at all. What you want to do is put your attention on if you're using MQLs, on the MQL that comes from an account where you have some evidence that they're probably in market, right? So if you have third-party intent that says, yeah, they're out looking at your competitors, and you have an MQL, okay, you should probably get in touch with that person, or try to. And whether it's email or call, it depends on the person, whether they like to talk or email or whatever. But yeah, that's some evidence that this person may be part of a buying team that's in market. Now, if you also can see that there's anonymous traffic on your website, so like if we know that for every person who fills out a form, there's 9 other people who didn't, right? So if somebody filled out a form, if that company's in market, chances are there's other people from that company who've been to your site anonymously, or that person has, right? So look for evidence of that. If you have third-party intent, great. If you have first-party intent, that anonymous traffic, that's more evidence. Like, okay, this guy's probably for real, right? They're trolling around my website. And then the other thing, and the thing you want to do for BDRs, and this back at SiriusDecisions is something that we saw a number of our customers do with really great success. You get an MQL. The first thing you do is go look for those other signals. Is there any other evidence? And if there's other evidence, provide that to the SDR so that they can see that, yeah, this is a good one for me to follow up on. And maybe I know something now about what they're looking at. If you have other leads, so we also want you to check to see if you have other leads that aren't yet MQLs. Did other people fill out a form and not just score up yet from the same company? Because if they did, package them all together. Put them all together and give that to the SDR and say, here's the 4 people, there's an MQL and 3 other folks who've been looking at our stuff. Now your job is go find out what's going on in that organization. And now we want you to treat that just like you would outbound prospecting, except you've got some warm names, right? So now it's not run your cadence against this person and give up after 15 tries. It's get your ass in that company, find out what's going on, and do not come home until you know.
Get in front of them. How should CMOs be identifying those cold traffic, the cold traffic to their website that's not reaching out, and maybe they're in very early stages, and also maybe you as a marketer did something a little stupid and you put something dumb on your website, or it didn't make sense, and so you did have a prospect there and they had intent, but they didn't download anything. They didn't opt in. They came to your site and was like, okay, I don't get it. And then they went to your competitors. How do you not miss out on those opportunities as well?
Well, you gotta have eyes on those signals, and that's a big part of what my company does. So I won't get too pitchy here, but that's what we do.
Now, bring it on. What do you do? Talk about Sixth Sense a little bit.
Yeah. So Sixth Sense, we call it an account engagement platform, because really what it's all about is first identifying using AI what are the right accounts to care about, which are the ones that really could be good customers, and then all of those signals that I just talked about, the third party intent, first party intent, multiple leads, all of those signals, bundling them together, right? So going out, looking around and identifying all of the signals from those accounts that you care about, and using them all to prioritize your SDRs and your sales reps behavior, right? So instead of just chasing after everybody who fills out a form, now we don't really care if somebody becomes an MQL. What we care about is what's the body of evidence that this account is in market. So maybe they didn't fill out a form on my website. I don't know why they didn't fill out a form, but if I can see that they're out looking around at competitors, and I can see that they've been on my website anonymously, and that looks like, and this is what our software does, is it says, let's look at that traffic, that behavior. Let's compare that to what it looks like when a company like this is actually in market. And when we ask the question, does it look like that? And if the answer is no, then don't follow up on it or don't prioritize it. But
do you get like buyer intent data from like Google, for example, as well? And
well, we make our own. We make our own, and then we also use other third-party intent providers. So if you've got multiple sources, and that's what we find works best. We love our own intent data, but there are other sources and other ways of seeing those prospects that are in market. And the more signal you have, the better you can figure out, does this really look like a buyer, or does this look like just a kind of random acts of researching solutions? But that's what we really want to do, is use all of the signal available to say, does this look like a real buying process? And is it a company that we care about? Because if it's both of those things, then you kind of go all in. Let's go find out what's happening here. Let's make sure that if there's a buying process there, that we get to be part of that. We get to compete for that. But if there's not, leave them alone, right? They may even be a great account, but if they're not in market and we go out and pester them now, they're not going to listen to us later on when they are in market, right? They're going to tune us out. And that's maybe as important as anything, right?
It's a fine balancing act for sure between the two.
But if you have enough data, it's not a guessing game anymore. You can get, and there's a lot, we've been doing this now digitally for a while. So
and how many marketers are guessing? How many marketers play the guessing game?
98%. Approximately all. And there are certainly a lot of companies that don't. We would certainly say that all of our clients are ones who are not in the guessing game anymore. And there are clients of our competitors who are not guessing as much as they used to anymore. So that's great. We want everybody, whether you do it with us or do it with somebody else, but we want every B2B organization to get out of the guessing game. And if you're a marketer, stop sending single MQLs where you know nothing else to people to follow up, because that's why they hate you. Those things suck. It's pretty simple.
Well, it's true. There's a battle between the two, and I hear it often. And marketing's like, "Hey, look at all this great stuff we're bringing you," and sales is like, "Dude, this is shit. Like, I can't do anything with this. There's no interest there, and I've done whatever, and there's no cohesion." People are operating in too much silos and missing the gap on like what's revenue generating and what's fluffy, what's fluffy marketing information.
Right. Yeah. And most of those leads, it's not that they're bad people. They may even be people from companies that you can sell something to and will sell something to eventually. But I mean, you just have to think about how we all act every day. Like, I'm constantly on websites looking at products and solutions and stuff because it's my job. It's professional interest, but it doesn't mean my company's going to buy something. Right. And I get calls and emails constantly from SDRs about stuff that I'm looked at. And, I'm not a buyer for 99% of the time. But if you looked to see whether there were other people from my company first before he called, you would go, oh, yeah, he's the only one. Never mind. Right.
Do you turn those into leads for your company? You're like, hey, listen, I know you're trying to contact me, but you shouldn't be right now. And here, let me tell you why. Exactly. By the way, you need to go to sixthsense.com.
Exactly right.
So, Kerry, you're welcome anytime on this podcast. There's so many different areas we can sell. You're just a wealth of information and a true mentor in the marketing and psychology and technology and data. And I would encourage anybody to go follow you on LinkedIn, connect with you. And if some closing words here, if we're in a room with tens of thousands of B2B marketers in a short few sentences, what else would you like to share in closing that's actionable, helpful, inspiring? The floor is yours.
Yep. What I would say to, especially to marketers, is you're probably doing a much better job than of attracting and engaging the people who are buyers for your solutions. But the systems and processes that you have in place today do not serve you. They don't allow you to see it. And you have to look past those. Like if you're marketing automation, Salesforce automation, and that's essentially what you do with leads coming through, you are shooting yourself in the foot with every step you take if you don't find those anonymous visitors and the multiple leads. And it's not that hard to do. Like, go find out today if your SDRs have a rule where they mark every second, third, fourth lead as duplicate. You can go find out if that's happening in the next 10 minutes. And then, 2 hours from now or tomorrow, you could have that fixed. And that will make a huge difference in how your business operates and how your stuff is valued. So go do that, then figure out who's on your website anonymously, and you will be substantially better off.
Best way for people to find you, follow you, stalk you, get into contact with you.
I'm on LinkedIn a lot. Love to hear from people on LinkedIn. So that'd be great.
Beautiful. And again, guys, go check out sixthsense.com, see what they're doing, do some research. Very much encourage you to go give Kerry a follow on LinkedIn. And Kerry, my friend, thank you so much for sharing your time, sharing your insights. Very much enjoy talking with you. Stick around for one quick second here while we wrap up. And for the rest of you, thank you. Make sure you share this video out with others. I guarantee you there's at least one person in your network who will find value in this information. And if you did too, make sure you subscribe. We release a new podcast episode every single day of the week, Monday through Friday. Mondays, we release new guest episodes on all of our podcast apps. And we have the solo show Tuesday through Friday, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, you name it. Find us there. Much love to you. Make it great. And I'll see you guys on the other side.